Okay, I want to talk a little bit about the geological timeline of the Earth, which is basically a history of the Earth. And this is laid out. First, we have our eons, the Hadean, the Archean, Proterozoic, and the Phanerozoic. Now, this eon, the Phanerozoic, is expanded into A, B, and C sections: the Paleozoic, the Mesozoic, and the Cenozoic. And then the Cenozoic is expanded into two groups or periods called the Paleogene and the Neogene. And underneath this are epochs. Now, the Cenozoic used to be called the Tertiary, and that is why we used to have what was called the KT boundary right here. This is the Cretaceous Tertiary. It was KT boundary because it was first proposed by the Germans, and they use K for that hard C sound, whereas we use a C. Now let's go through these real quick. The Archaic eon is primarily marked by bacteria that were extremophiles. They lived in extremely hostile environments, but one of the byproducts, their waste products, were oxygen. And it was during the Archean that we started getting our oxygen atmosphere. Now, when we go into the Phanerozoic, there's the Cambrian period. The Cambrian is where we start first seeing a lot of multicellular invertebrates. You move into the Ordovician and the Silurian, and this is like right here, the Ordovician. This is when we had sea scorpions that were 6, 8, 10 feet long. Then we moved into the Devonian. We started seeing the very, very primitive type of fish. The Carboniferous is called the Carboniferous because this is where geologists find fossil fuels. Now there's the Permian and the Triassic. Now the Mesozoic is made up of three periods: the Triassic, the Jurassic, and the Cretaceous. This is an interesting era for a lot of people because this is where the dinosaurs were. Now in the Triassic, we had lots of really large reptiles and the pelycosaurs, which were the descendants, or the precursors rather, to mammals. Now, in the Jurassic and Cretaceous, this is when you saw things like stegosaurs, and the Cretaceous, you had Tyrannosaurus rex. Then we moved into the more modern area. This KT boundary between the Mesozoic and the Cenozoic, that's when the giant asteroid hit the Earth and caused so much damage that it wiped out all the large dinosaurs. The smaller dinosaurs were able to survive and evolved into what we call the birds today. And then we go into the Paleocene, or the Paleogene, which is made up of the Paleocene, the Eocene, and the Oligocene. And this is where we see the rise of birds and mammals. This was a giant carnivorous bird that was very aggressive. It's called the terror bird. Things like horses, things like that started evolving. Then you go into the Neogene, which has the Miocene and the Pliocene. This is when, here in the Pliocene, we start seeing the Pleistocene. This is the big ice age. And now we get here. So basically, humans haven't been around for all that long. Okay, but we're right here at the end, right after the Pleistocene, which is when you had all the Ice Age mammals like the woolly rhinoceros and the mammoth and things like that. And some of those skulls gave rise to some of the myths. There were the woolly mammoth skulls, have a large hole in the center of the forehead, and this gave rise, these skulls that were found gave rise to the Cyclops myths, and the woolly rhinos gave rise to the unicorn myths. And that was further exploited by the Northmen, who used to catch the narwhals and take their twisted horns and then would sell them to unsuspecting people in Europe as unicorn horns. All right, that's all I want to talk about in this geological timeline. Now we'll have a quick question.